Minister Goyal talked about how we're going through a very challenging time, and a lot of that right now has to do with President Trump's tariffs. He has upended global trade, imposing the biggest change we have seen in about 100 years. At the crux of it is that 10% tariffs imposed on friends and foes, and for those countries with a trade surplus with the US, they're hit even harder. India, 26%. We have China at 34%, Vietnam, 46%, and for a country like Lesotho, a small country in Africa, one of the poorest in the continent, slapped with 50%. Now, all this coming at a time when global growth is slowing, inflation remains sticky, and for India, it comes despite having made concessions to US companies like Tesla. So what gives? What does it mean for India? What does it mean for global trade, and where do we go from here? Mr. Goyal, such a pleasure to have you with us. 26% tariffs for a friend who stood by the US and possibly helped to counter China's growing dominance in the world. How do you feel about that? How does India feel about that?
I think we all know that it's a formula-based tariff. And based on that formula, friend or foe, everybody fit into that formula and had a tariff imposed on them. So it's nothing to do with the fact that we are friends. Clearly, Prime Minister Modi and President Trump are very good friends, as are the administrations of the US and India, and as are the business persons and people of the two countries. So I think let's not conflate issues. There's nothing to do with, for that matter, UK is a very good friend, US is EU is very good friends all over. But I think this is just a formula-based tariff.
So are you in conversations? Are you hoping that perhaps you'll get an exemption or perhaps a delay in the implementation?
Well, I think what we discuss in the boardroom is not discussed in a public forum.
But you are in conversations then?
That is a matter of public record. I think when the Prime Minister and President Trump met in February, they had both announced that we shall enter into discussions for a bilateral trade agreement by the fall of 25. Both countries are old friends, old allies, trusted partners. Our businesses work seamlessly with each other. India opened their arms to all the tech giants, be it Google, be it Meta. All of them were welcome in India, even when many other developed countries, and certainly China, did not allow them to operate in their countries. We have hundreds of thousands of students in the United States. We have a strategic partnership which transcends the economy. So there's lots that we are working together on. This will also be something that will add luster to our relationship.
So that trade deal is coming, and you're confident it will happen by year end, including the other trade deals that you're working on, including the UK as well as Europe, which you have just indicated are friends.
And I'm not going to give Bloomberg a headline.
Put this in perspective for us. With what's going on right now, are we at the start of deglobalization? We've been throwing this word deglobalization for a while now.
I don't think so. I think this is reglobalization with honest terms of trade and countries which believe in the rule of law, like India, working in partnership with like nations who also would like to have an orderly framework. In the short run, there could be some turmoil, but as I mentioned earlier, India believes in converting every crisis into an opportunity.
So how do you seize the opportunities? What opportunities do you see? How does India play a bigger role in the shifting supply chains?
Ms. Amin, we are a democracy. We believe in the rule of law. There's fair play. We don't discriminate between Indian or foreign investment. All are welcome. The rules of the game are equal. Everything we do is transparent. And we have a very, very independent judiciary and ferociously ruthless media. And add to that the social media now. Unforgiving. So obviously in India, we offer a conducive environment to work with. We have the world's largest population, 1.4 billion Indians, providing demand. And that local demand itself, sometimes I often worry that the local demand is growing so rapidly and our businesses are quite comfortable to grow and meet the local demand. And despite that, we are not able, we still need imports because there's so much demand in a growing, fastest growing economy, large economy in the world, that we are not focused enough on even exports, which is why I appeal that we have to leverage on all these free trade agreements. Otherwise, it's no good to do all of this.
But talk to us about how global trade will change on the back of what we're seeing right now. An environment with tariffs being imposed on all countries.
It'll be a very different world. They have to figure out how it'll be administered. I, for the life of me, have not yet been able to understand how they will administer. For example, I don't know if you've observed the trade deficit of the United States with Vietnam over the years. 20 years ago, it was close to zero, maybe $1 billion to $3 billion. 5 years ago, it was probably 30 odd billion dollars. Or 7 years ago. During the Trump administration first term, they slapped tariffs on China. And everybody thought their trade deficit with China has come down as a result of those tariffs. What we only found was that there was a trade diversion, and the deficit from Vietnam has grown by the equal amount by which the deficit fell from China. So I think we've not heard the end of the story. We still need to see how trade diversion from countries who do not believe in fair play or transparency can be safeguarded against. We in India believe very strongly that we will stick to the rules of the game, and we believe that in the long run, ethics and honesty in operations always pays off.
A country like the US says that India still practices protectionism. 17% tariffs, which is among the highest in the world. Is this an opportunity for India to rethink how it does trade and who it does trade with?
You know, I'm on record on this on several occasions. And a little bit of research would have given you that background.
Shed some light anyways.
I think our tariffs are a protection against these unfair trade practices. Or countries, let's take the RCEP region. Countries which cross-subsidize, which subsidize in one geography, move to another, and from there ship goods to a third. There are several ways which we are continuously finding. And it's like trying to remain abreast with new ways of beating the system. And a lot of our tariffs are to do with such protection against such economies. If you look at the United States, for example, while our overall tariff may be 17%, but a lot of it is products which we don't import it at all. Our applied tariff to the United States is probably 7 or 8%. It's not humongous. So really, it's a question of understanding India's tariff story. We've done an FTA with Australia a couple of years, 3 years ago, with UAE, with the 4 EFTA countries. We're in active dialogue with many other countries and group of countries. So we are a country that believes that bilaterally we can work together with countries which have fair trade practices. And then we don't need this kind of protection. Indian industry is very competent. They can beat any competition in the world if everybody sticks to the rules of the game. It's the it's the irregularities or the unfair trade practices where we need to protect through tariffs. So I have absolutely no hesitation in saying that bilaterally, we have a lot of elbow room in working with developed countries and countries where we find equal opportunity to do business.
You made a lot of reference to China. Do you see that trade relationship with China evolving? I mean, if you're laying the red carpet for the likes of Tesla, why not accept a company like BYD, which is looking for a domestic partner in India to do EVs?
Well, we need to be convinced that they will work by the rules of the game. And several unfair practices which are gradually coming to light as more and more companies come to us with what's happening, the kind of dumping that's happening in steel, for example. As we understand how they are doing third country subsidization, so country A is where the subsidy is provided, whatever you know which country I'm referring to. It goes to country B in the RCEP region, where they do the requisite value addition, which becomes simpler because the basic raw material is moving at very low prices. So value addition norms are easier to meet. And that subsidized product is being dumped on other countries like us. I mean, as these practices come to light, we have to be cautious in whom we allow to invest in the country. We have to be cautious about our strategic interests, our security interests. So it's a mix of many issues before we are able to take that decision.
So it's not a definite no for BYD. It depends on whether it can convince you.
As of now, it's a no.
You talked about dumping, and I know that a lot of countries are concerned that China may be dumping more of its products, its cheap products, on countries around the region. We know that the Philippines has made reference to it, Thailand, Vietnam. With the tariffs being imposed on China by the US, do you see a lot more dumping by China to countries like India?
It's quite possible, and we will all have to be cautious. And through you and through this medium, I can request Indian industry to be on top of it, on top of what's happening in your different sectors. And please keep the government informed so that we can proactively take action. Of course, with data and solid information.
Let's talk about the Indian growth story. You made reference to it. Right now, estimated at 6.5% for the year. But with the tariffs, some say it could knock off about 1%. Is not a fair assumption?
No estimate is talking of knocking off 1%. Bear in mind, India is not an export-dependent economy. We value exports, value them immensely. We have crossed $800 billion of exports, goods and services, in the year just gone by, 31st March 25. And of course, I value our service exports as much as I value our goods export, because every country has their own USP. Michael Porter's theory of comparative advantage of nations. We may have a competitive edge over others in our services sector. We'll grow that faster. Wherever we see an opportunity, we are growing that. Having said that, the large domestic demand has kind of kept India full up, and any trade disruption or global slowing of trade or economies may really not have that large an impact on the Indian economy.
If it's not 1%, what would it be? 0.5%? Less than that?
I am no economist, I am no astrologer.
But if you were to hazard a guess, being a trade minister, a commerce minister...
It's too early to say. Our year has just begun. We are on the 7th day of our year. On the 7th day of the year, certainly I am not competent enough to predict what the next 358 days are going to be.
How concerned are you about the volatility in the Indian rupee?
Indian?
Rupee.
I don't think it's very volatile. On the contrary, we have outperformed our peers We perform better than most competition emerging markets. We do not interfere.
Of late, of course, we saw how the Indian rupee actually slumped to close to record levels.
The whole world's economy, currency slumped to record levels. We slumped a little less than the others. So it's an evolving situation. The uncertainty always causes distress to the currency. And from what we are seeing in the last 4 or 5 days, today probably was a reversal, but 4 or 5 days we've seen a rapid rise in the economy. Some of my exporters have been really worried. Of course, I can't do anything about it. It's market forces.
You seem pretty optimistic about the prospects for the country. What do you deem as the biggest challenge for India in the next 12, 24 months, or even 4 years? I think it was mentioned that there's a lot of uncertainty in the next 4 years.
4 years is a very long period. I don't think I see any kind of global disruption for such a long period.
People talk about geo-economic fragmentation, a tripolar world.
But some countries deserve to be fragmented and thrown out. So I think fair trade partners coming closer together is good for India and will help us grow faster. And we will be able to contribute to the growth of and the economies of the developed world, which is currently going through this turmoil. So we are open to do business with partners who mean well for us, as long as they also do not give us a bad deal. It has to be a win-win situation. Every relationship has to be fair, equitable, and balanced. If I find the right balance, which works for India, with my mission of India first, as should be the mission of the other country to protect their interests. I recognize and respect that. And as long as both partners respect each other's sensitivities, we can't go wrong. So I do believe that we are on a sweet spot. There could be a short-term challenge, but I think we need to stay strong. We need to believe in ourselves, and we need to have a positive mindset and trust that we are in safe hands, something which the people of India have demonstrated now for the 3rd time by electing Prime Minister Modi back in government. They trust his leadership, and I believe they believe that the country is in safe hands.
You talk about how the country is in a sweet spot, currently about 6.5% growth. Is that the sweet spot in terms of growth for the country? Is that the sustainable growth trajectory?
You know, when Prime Minister Modi was contesting the 2014 election, 11 years ago, when he was elected to become Prime Minister, he was at a ladies' event, a FICCI Flow event, if some of you may remember. It was widely telecast all over the country. And to a similar question, he had raised his glass of water, which was half full. Mine is a little below half full. And this question, the response is like the half full glass. I think an aspirational 1.4 billion people, and Prime Minister Modi is always nudging the people of India, particularly the youth of India, to aim big, to dream big, to aspire for big things in life, not to rest on our laurels. We have a lot we can do, a lot to achieve, and collectively when 1.4 billion people make it their mission in life to make India a great country, a prosperous country, to provide for 1.4 billion people's prosperity. We are, as I said earlier, India is unstoppable.
Minister Piyush Goyal, we thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.